This is the Planning and Development Committee meeting, Monday, July 28. First item on our agenda is approval of the regular meeting minutes of July 14. Can I have a motion?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
There are no changes. All right, items for consideration. First item, Alderman Grover, would you like to introduce that?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move introduction of...
Hold on, Alderman Grover. Could we please have, thank you very much,
Thank you, Ms.
Sue.
Calder.
Thank you.
Oh,
No. Could somebody close the door out there? You're making so much noise we cannot hear. Thank you.
And in the meantime...
Yes,
may I
in the
move
meantime.
introduction of Ordinance 78014, which are amendments to our Inclusionary Housing Ordinance.
Second.
Make a report?
I am.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Rainey and members of the Planning and Development Committee. I'm Sarah Flax, the Housing and Grants Administrator for Evanston, and I'll take you through proposed changes to the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance that were developed by the Housing and Homelessness Commission, working with staff. Affordable housing in Evanston has been something we've been looking at a lot. Last task forces and studies have shown a dramatic decline in affordable housing and a dramatic need for it, especially rental. Families can no longer afford to live here and are struggling to stay in Evanston. And in order to maintain our economic diversity and enable people who work here to live here to be a sustainable community, we need to look at expanding it. The loss of affordable housing units has really been quite dramatic. The Affordable Housing Planning and Appeal Act has done a study of different numbers, and from 2004 to 2013, Evanston lost about 3,300 affordable units. That's 40% of the total affordable units that they counted Evanston as having in 2004. Now, what is affordable and who is it affordable to? That's important to know. This particular study looked at for sale housing being affordable to households at 80% of area median, and rental housing affordable to households at 60% of the area median. That's always a problem. What is the area median? Sorry.
Alderman Holmes.
Ms. Flack, do you have the actual numbers? Could you just say that so that our audience will understand what that means? Because a lot of times people
Just
don't.
getting to that.
Thank you.
80% of area median right now for a household of one is a gross income of $40,550. A household of four at 80% of area median would be $57,900. So a lot of us sort of think of that as middle class, or it used to be anyway. 60% of area median is, for a household of one, is $30,420. And for a household of four is $43,440. So I want to try to put that in perspective. Who might be in those income levels? I looked at the District 65 jobs posted, and a teacher with a bachelor's degree being hired this year would be hired at $46,349. That would be their starting salary. If they had a master's, they'd be a little over $50,000. A custodian would be hired at about $31,300. So these are kind of the income levels that, and the types of people we might be talking about. The City of Evanston has a preschool program supervisor job posted right now with a salary ranging from about $37,000 to about $54,000. So a lot of the people, the households we're talking about are people who are already working and in some cases living in our community. Yeah.
Alderman Fisk.
I had a
You
quick.
don't, we can interrupt you, right? 'Cause we-
Absolutely.
What about university students?
We're not looking at university students
Would they
specifically.
qualify for affordable units?
No, we don't. Traditionally, we've always said, and it's in our ordinance, that university students, full-time students, unless they are independent households, which is usually defined as 24 or older, head of household with children or something. So students who are still being subsidized by their parents, we don't look at for affordable housing.
Okay, but graduate students, if they're 24 or older,
They
would
could,
qualify?
if they are independent households, they could.
Okay.
Alderman Grover now has a question.
Thank you, Ms. Flax. Thank you, Madam Chair. So in looking at who might be people who would not find our housing affordable because of their income level, you were able to find jobs on the city's website and the public schools website, and it's mostly because those job scales are available to us because they are public information, but there are a whole range of other jobs and employers who offer full-time employment that meet our definition of income qualified for affordable housing, and these are folks who we would consider, as you suggested, in the middle class.
Absolutely. Right now, if somebody is making even $15 an hour, if you multiply that out to their annual salary, that gets them someplace into the low to mid-20s as an annual salary. Our minimum wage is $8.25. Somebody who is minimum wage, frankly, is below most of the levels that we're looking at for our affordability here. So, it's one of the challenges. What's happening to incomes? Incomes are stagnating, and they're not, and housing costs are not.
Alderman Nguyen has a question, then maybe we'll continue. We're going to need to get this flowing.
Right. Ms. Flax, I can think of a number of things that might lower that percentage over between 04 and 13, but what did your study find? What was the main reason? We experienced the housing bubble, but then we experienced the Great Recession. So how did that work out in this to produce that 40% drop?
First of all, we lost rental, especially. We lost a lot of rental. We had a lot of rental converting to condos, and that affected our rental market. But then, because right now it's difficult to buy, hard to get mortgages, a lot of people who were buying are not able to buy, so it pushes up the demand for rental. One of the things is when you look at what the Housing Authority considers, Evanston is an exception community because it's a high-cost housing market. So if you look at what is considered the HUD fair market rent for a two-bedroom apartment, it is $979. In Evanston, in 60201, the Housing Authority will pay $1,260. In 60202, they'll pay $1,100. So we're out of sync even with the Chicago market. Okay? So our housing costs have gone up, or our affordable housing has gone away. So that's resulted in people spending a disproportionate amount of their gross income on housing. Right now in Evanston, over 38% of our families are spending more than 50% of their gross income on housing, which is, according to HUD, an extreme housing cost burden. And when you think of all the other things you have to pay for, if 50% is just going to your housing, that really leaves you not a whole lot else for anything else. And even when housing costs were going down, wages were dropping much faster, further exacerbating it. Now, housing costs are beginning to go up, as we know, but wages are really stagnating. So, what are the recommendations for the inclusionary housing ordinance? We did get 2,000 additional units. We've constructed 2,000 additional housing units since 2000, but none of those have played into our affordable housing. So one thing is to expand the definition of covered development to include rental and condo conversions. The current ordinance covers only new for-sale housing in developments of 25 units or more. So expand it to developments of 5 or more units, and maintain the 10% affordability in privately funded developments, but increase the percentage of affordable units to 20% when public funding is involved. For rental,
Excuse me. That's the question.
I'm sorry to backtrack a little bit, Ms. Flax. You said at the very beginning that we have lost 3,300 units of affordable housing since 2004, and there may be some misunderstanding about how these are differentiated, but yet we have constructed 2,000 additional housing units. So could you just, 2 more sentences about how those 2 different types of housing are different? And
right, we've lost affordable units, units that are affordable to households at 80 and 60% of area median, and the new developments, which have been market rate, are really completely out of the reach of those households.
so the additional 2,000 additional housing units are not aimed at those who live at 80% of,
Correct.
Okay.
They're 100% or up,
or
sometimes dramatically more than that based on the rents I've seen.
sure.
But we did not experience 3,000 condo conversions.
No, but because of the demands for rental, everybody can raise their rent too, so it's a combination of factors, you're right.
So the rents got raised beyond the technical definition
Correct.
of affordable housing.
Correct.
Or the salaries dropped, or people became unemployed.
Combination of many, many things, yes.
And so much of this discussion is based upon technical definitions of affordability, affordable housing, and who is qualified for that housing.
Right.
Right.
So, the recommendation for rental affordability is for all units to be affordable at 60% or below, but half of them really at 60% and half at 30% of area median. To maintain affordability of the rental units for 25 years, to increase the fee in lieu of affordable units on site from $40,000 to $100,000, and to set a minimum square footage for affordable units that's based on our property standards code. The current ordinance requires affordable units to be basically the same footprint as the for sale unit, the market rate units. Finishes can be different, but the one thing that we want to make sure is maintained is energy efficiency and water efficiency, regardless of whether it's an affordable or a market rate unit. Developer benefits continue from the existing ordinance, which are expedited application review process, waiver of building permit and plan review fees that are related to the affordable units, and deferral of building and plan review fees until receipt of temporary certificate of occupancy for market rate units.
That it?
That's it.
Alderman Wilson, and then Alderman Glover.
Thank you. I think the intention, of course, is something that we should be striving for. But I guess the fundamental problem I have with this is, let's take a 10-unit building that's going to be built. Who's going to bear the cost of the affordable unit? And to me, the economic cost, I can't see any other way around it, is the other 9 units are going to bear the cost. In other words, the person who's doing the development isn't going to decide, okay, I'm going to take less profit on my project. They're going to raise the rents on the other 9 units. So the problem I have with this focuses the burden on the neighbors who probably aren't too far off from that calculation in the first place. So what we're doing is we're imposing roughly maybe like a 7 or 8% tax on the housing of the units that are in the building. And the people who live in a single-family house in Evanston bear no burden at all. People who live in existing housing bear no burden at all. So 100% of the cost of doing this is going to be focused on a very small and finite number of people who probably aren't the ones who can afford to be the ones financing this idea. So that's my fundamental problem with the structure on this.
Alderman Grover.
Thank you.
And then Alderman Grover, can I interrupt?
Yes, ma'am.
We have 4 people who would like to speak to this, so once you're finished, we'll do that.
Yeah, my other question is a simple one. And again, we've created additional housing through the NSP2 grant, the $18.1 million of NSP2 grant. Where does that housing fit into our net loss of affordable housing units, if it does at all?
It actually did lose us some affordable units because one of the differences with NSP is it was a stabilization program, not primarily an affordable housing program. We were going into our neighborhoods that were most devastated by foreclosures, and there were 2 income limits in the neighborhood stabilization program. One is 120% of area median, and much of actually, I think all but one of the for sale units were sold to households between 100 and 120% of area median. It's very difficult for people, even at 80, to qualify for mortgages right now. But the purpose of that program was to bring stability and ownership back into neighborhoods that had very, very high rental rates, and in some cases, some really not very good rental, and in addition to the vacancies. The rental also is about half at 120% and about half at 50% of area median.
And how many additional units did that create? We were rehabbing existing
Yes.
units. So
we were rehabbing existing units. So far, we have 116 total units being occupied from the whole program, both the new units and the rehabbed units. The new units are 32, so the rest are the rehabbed. We actually didn't put all of the rehabbed units back into sale or actually rehab some of them. Some of the properties were in such bad shape they were torn down and have not yet been replaced.
So again, that hits at a different income
Yes.
level, and it didn't add anywhere near 3,300 additional units, much less affordable units.
But I do want to make a point about the NSP2 program. One of our goals was to house Evanston people and people who worked in Evanston. 70% of the residents of those 116 units either already lived or worked in Evanston.
And it was, by all accounts, a successful program. By all
I think so.
accounts. Yes.
And not a lot of rich people benefited from it.
No.
They did not. They were
Absolutely.
moderate income and
Absolutely.
low-income people. So, to couch this that it didn't help,
It helped.
it helped. It helped.
Yes.
Alderman Holmes and then Alderman Fisk, please.
I just want to follow up with, I know we will have speakers. I just need to have Alderman Wilson help me to understand what you said about the comparison of a single-family home with a development. I just
No, he
don't.
said that they're not contributing anything to affordable housing. Only the tenants in the affordable housing and the landlords are helping in the configuration that we've been presented with. In other words, a single-family home.
I heard it. I'm just trying to make the comparison because when you buy a single-family home, of course you understand that. So if a developer is building a building, I'm just not. I'm just have to say I'm just absolutely lost. I can't get the comparison because you rent. I mean, you understand that you're renting. The developer is making money to build. I mean, he's building to make money, and then you're saying that he's going to pass that along to the tenants. I got that piece.
Right.
When he has an affordable unit in that building. So for a 10 unit, it would be one one unit that would be affordable,
Right.
and he's going to take that rent and then just prorate it across to the other rentals to cover the cost of the affordable unit.
I would expect so, sure.
Okay.
So that puts the burden on the other unit owners in the building instead of on the community as a whole.
First of all, unless it's a not-for-profit developer who gets item money or some
Right,
other
I
money,
understand that.
you are not going to have any developer building a 10-unit rental building.
Absolutely.
In this town or anyplace.
Well, I did that
I
for simple
know you
math.
do.
Right,
I know.
right,
I
right.
I know why you did it, because it's easier to calculate.
Right.
Right.
But in this case, it's not going to happen. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sarah, did you look at, well, I know you've been here when we've had developers come forward and say that if they're required to put in affordable units, that will mean that they're not able to get their financing. And what would you say to that? Did you look at that?
Well, there are developers who continue to get financing for market rate with affordable housing in other communities, and it probably can be done, not in all cases. But the other thing that is in the ordinance still is the ability for any developer to negotiate different benefits or to argue his or her case on a one-by-one basis. That's retained in the ordinance.
To argue to the city?
Yeah.
Okay. But
To make alternate proposals.
in terms of paying the city for,
It's very open. They can also say, they can argue their case, and it's, I have to find the language. Yeah. What? Okay, I'm on the wrong page, sorry. Don't mean to take so long to find this. Says, if the applicant presents clear and convincing financial evidence to the city council that full compliance with section 4 of this chapter, payment in lieu as per section 8 of this chapter, or alternate equivalent action as per section 9 of this chapter, or any combination thereof would render the development financially infeasible, the applicant may seek a reduction in the required number of affordable dwelling units and or payment in lieu as to render the project financially feasible.
Oh, well, that's clear.
Sorry.
Not to mention subjective.
Right.
All right, let's move on, and we can study this a little
Okay.
bit later. All right, we're going to have citizen comment. Thank you very much, Sarah. You've worked very hard on this. Appreciate all you do. Brendan Sanders. I can tell everybody who doesn't know it, this man works very hard with tenants of this community, and we really thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
filled a
I
gap.
appreciate that.
Really.
So, my name is Brendan Saunders. I am the Director of Advocacy and Organizing at Open Communities. Our mission is to educate, advocate, organize, and promote just and inclusive communities in North Suburban Chicago. Open Communities is a small nonprofit that provides many direct services to suburban residents, such as mortgage and foreclosure counseling, home sharing, fair housing services, and practical advice to landlords and tenants, which I do here. Also, Open Communities has created the Welcome Movement, which is an outlet that allows people to share attitudes, take collective action, and foster welcoming communities. I first want to thank the members of Planning and Development for taking the first step to address one of the biggest issues in Evanston and throughout the nation, the lack of affordable housing. The most common call that Open Communities receives every day is from people asking for affordable housing. These calls regularly come from Evanston residents and workers. I encourage Planning and Development to work with staff and community stakeholders to make this a strong ordinance that will address the needs for Evanston. The proposed amendments are a great start, but we want to make sure it includes tools that will be long-lasting and equal protections for all future development in Evanston. The topics I would like to see included in the proposed changes are added incentives and protections for affordable housing around transit-oriented developments, tools to create housing specifically for people with disabilities, and tools to make sure that affordable units are equally spread throughout Evanston and do not get concentrated in one area. The proposed amendments are a strong step and will help make Evanston an even greater place to live. I receive calls every day telling me how great Evanston is. These changes will help bring jobs to the community, bring in even more diversity, and help fill a void that impacts the whole region, the lack of affordable housing. The changes can also be a tool to use to affirmatively further fair housing, which is a hot topic at the moment. A broad group of residents and employees in Evanston may potentially benefit from this, looking at municipal workers, bank tellers, preschool teachers, social workers, service workers, and many, many other people that we don't even think about that may need affordable housing. According to the Illinois Housing Planning and Appeals Act, Evanston's had in 2004 25.9% of its units being affordable, which
Say
went
that
down.
again, Ben.
According to the Illinois Housing Planning and Appeals Act, which did the study that Sarah Flax quoted earlier, said that in 2004, Evanston had 25.9% of its units being affordable. And now in 2014, that dropped to 15.9% of the units being affordable. Development is going to continue to happen in Evanston regardless of this ordinance or not. This ordinance is a chance for the city to capture those units and make sure that the residents who live here, can work here, can stay here and enjoy here. Evanston's a model community, and now it has a chance to amend this existing ordinance and become an example for all communities to follow. Thank you for taking the first steps in these changes, and I look forward to working with you in the near future.
Thanks. All right, next on our list is Paul Selden. Paul?
Thank you. I'm Paul Selden. I live at 1235 Maple Ave here in Evanston. And I'm here as a citizen.
But could you just explain who else you are?
Yes, I'm the executive director of Connections for the Homeless. Okay. There are others to speak for
Which is really your identity, of course.
So we need inclusionary zoning in Evanston. And I think this amendment is a good beginning. There are just too many longtime residents of Evanston who are getting priced out of their homes and out of their apartments. And these aren't just poor Evanstonians, as you've already heard from Sarah. Middle-class Evanstonians are losing their housing as well. I'm going to repeat some of the statistics you've already heard. Mine are a little bit different, so forgive the variations. But I think they all say more or less the same thing. So in the 2011 American Community Survey, 1 in 3 renter households in Evanston had extreme rent burdens. That was basically the 38% that Sarah talked about. Extreme rent burden is 50% of your income going to housing. And that doesn't include your transportation. Transportation will add another 10% ordinarily in a community like this. So now 60% of your income has gone to keeping a roof over your head. That doesn't leave a lot for everything else. 1 in 6 households has 1 or more unrelated individuals living with them. That's doubling up. According to the 2014 McKinney-Vento statistics on our school districts, there are currently 481 homeless children in District 65. That's a 78% increase over last year, 481. That's 7.5% of the school district is homeless. The fastest growing demographic in the city are people like myself, 65 and older, and the amount of new housing, affordable housing for people 65 and over that's been added in the last 10 years is 0. We are coming on a new age of people aging, and we haven't even begun to prepare for that. So what does this say about us? It says not only that we don't want poor people, but that we don't want municipal workers living here, school teachers. We don't want multi-generational families. We don't want people born and raised here, who go to school here, who work here, through their lives and retire here. It says that we want to look a little more white, a lot more rich, and a lot more like Wilmette and Winnetka, where they can boast that they only have 3 homeless children in their school district. But is this really the message that we want to deliver? And I, for one, don't think it is. I've only lived in Evanston 17 years, but it never crossed my mind that in coming here that I would be saying any of these things were good. Please understand, I recognize that that there are multiple drivers to the cost of housing. And not all are under your control, but zoning is. Providing density bonuses is one way of doing this. And I am concerned about some of the concern about cost. You know, you're talking about the cost to the developer, and this particular ordinance right now does put the burden on the developer. But there are some other ways of building into it things that will relieve that burden, such as density bonuses, reductions in parking. You know, we have
Never happened.
But there, you know, inclusionary zoning has been done across this country, and so there are lots of examples to look at where it works. In any case, inclusionaries won't solve the problems that we've been talking about, or that I talked about, but it is a step in the right direction, and it certainly delivers the right message. It says that we value diversity, and that we value people who live in our community. All of them. Thank you.
Suzanne Calder.
I'm Suzanne Calder, and I live at 1509 Asbury, and I could wear a number of hats to address this issue, but tonight I'm making a statement on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Evanston in support of the revisions to the inclusionary housing ordinance. The League has several positions on housing, but there are 2 in particular that lead to our support. For the League, a position is reached after a committee spends about a year studying the issue and then presents its findings to the membership. The membership then does not vote on the nuances discussed, but comes to a consensus on the issue. Several of our housing positions are more than 40 years old, but all of our positions are reviewed and either affirmed or dropped each year. So the 2 that particularly address this inclusionary housing ordinance is a support for moderate and low-income housing, and also support for encouragement and assistance in the development of a housing supply with a variety and a diversity of housing types and prices. So on behalf of the League, I urge you to support the changes and forward it to the full council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sue from Connections. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Sue Lolbach. I'm speaking on behalf of Connections for the Homeless in Evanston tonight. Connections works with about 900 people a year who are homeless or unstably housed and who consider themselves Evanstonians. They grew up here and went to school here. They go to Evanston churches and synagogues. They've gotten married here. They've had their babies at Evanston hospitals, and their children go to schools in Districts 65 and 202. Many of them work here and pay taxes in Evanston. Most would like to continue to live here and to end their days here, and they would like to be buried in Evanston cemeteries next to their relatives. They belong here, yet Evanston is failing them. The lack of affordable housing has made Evanston a very difficult place to live for single parents, for anyone who makes less than $15 an hour, for part-time or underemployed workers, and for anyone on a fixed income. People who fit into these categories in Evanston are probably struggling. They may have homes, but because they pay so much of their income on rent, they do not have enough money for other basic needs. These are the people who end up coming to Connections for help. Connections would like to thank the Housing and Homeless Commission for proposing changes to the inclusionary zoning ordinance. We feel the proposed changes are a good first step in embracing the research and results that show the following: that affordable housing helps workers to keep their jobs and allows even low wages to go further. That affordable housing helps people to be healthier because they have more money to pay for medical and healthcare expenses and for healthy foods. That affordable housing improves the cognitive and social development of children by eliminating the traumas of evictions and couch surfing and letting kids focus instead on their studies and on being kids. That affordable housing reduces youth violence, which has been shown to increase in proportion to parental stress. And what could cause parental stress more than the thought of losing your housing? And for all these reasons, that affordable housing does not cost communities, but strengthens their economic viability. The hope of Connections is that the City Council will ultimately approve the proposed changes to the inclusionary zoning ordinance. And we hope that our agency can work with the city on implementing further changes so that Evanston can support and retain all of the people who are part of our diverse and very complex community. Thank you.
All right. That concludes the citizen comment committee discussion. I'd just like to make one comment, and that is, in reviewing this, it really focuses on new housing, both rental and condo conversion. What if nothing new is built? I mean, we have a project coming to us tonight, a planned development, the corner of Main and Chicago Avenue. I'm trying to think of other large lots in this town that are available for 5 units or more, which this ordinance would cover. And I'm having a hard time thinking of them. So what do we do about the people I'm really concerned about, and that is the people whose disposable income is shrinking by the year because they are paying too much in a mortgage based on their income, or too much in rent. This, as far as I can see, this does nothing to help the reality of today, people who are living here now. I don't know what it does, and I might be missing it. I have no idea of the order of these lights, but I'm going to start with Alderman Tendam, then Alderman Fisk, and Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think one thing that that really concerns me is something that Mr. Selden said about the seniors in our community. These are people, and I'm certainly edging towards a senior status. These are people that we should be really making an all-out effort to maintain in the community. Their knowledge, their wealth of experience, it all adds up to making this a better community. And what we're seeing now is people leaving, people that have been living in institutions, not institutions, but housing in downtown and other places, and single-family homes are saying that they can no longer afford to stay here now that they're on a set income. So that really stands out in my mind as a huge loss if we can't somehow cast a net and really sort of maintain that that valuable body of residents. I would like to follow up on something that Mr. Sullivan said as well, as far as bonuses. I think it hasn't been included here, but I certainly would support anything we could add to this ordinance in the way of bonuses for developers that would like to, work with them. We're not trying to work against them. We are trying to really work this all out to everyone's benefit. So I do support this. I think it's time to walk the walk. Walk the talk. We have talked about this for a long, long time, and I think staff, Mary Ellen, and Sarah Flax have put together a wonderful proposal along with the board of the Housing and Homeless Commission. So thank you very much.
Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Alderman Tindem, thank you for bringing up the North Shore Hotel. No, well, but I was going to bring it up because this is the dilemma that we have. I mean, Alderman Wilson is correct. I mean, what we've seen at the North Shore Hotel is we've seen, thank goodness, someone who has come in and wanted to rehabilitate a building that was in desperate need of rehabilitation, rather than have it be turned into something that I think none of us really wanted. In the process, a number, and I would say a majority of the residents found that the new rents that went along with the cost of rehabilitation were unaffordable and have left. But that also means that if we impose a demand or assess a fine, that's not going to be picked up by the developer. That's going to be picked up by the other residents of the building and make the the rents that are affordable in the building even less affordable. So I have to say that I'm having a problem with this and need to think it through a little bit more, because that's a very practical situation in my ward where I've been so unhappy to lose a lot of the folks in that building that I know hated to leave Evanston. And I cannot see that or expect a developer to come in and not pass along those costs to the people who are least able to afford it. So I'll have to do some thinking about that.
Alderman Grover.
I think it's a really interesting question, is where to find the balance. And there may be more room to add things in, such as the accommodations for certain developers, benefits for developers that might make this more palatable and more affordable. A good question to ask as we even consider creating exceptions to the requirements. A reduction of requirements is what kind of return for a developer is a reasonable one. If we're going to require convincing financial evidence that the development would be rendered financially infeasible with the inclusion of affordable units, what is a reasonable return for a developer as part of that financial analysis? And we don't have standards yet on anything, I think, that we would consider a reasonable return for a developer. What's that amount? What is best practices? What is the standard in other communities for a reasonable return? I'll certainly be reaching out to colleagues in Highland Park to find out how it's worked there and what hasn't worked and lessons learned, and has the worst case scenario come true. Has it stifled development? Have developers turned away? Has Highland Park become unattractive? I don't know without talking to people I know in the City Council in Highland Park, and I'll certainly do that. So I think there's more information. This is only before us tonight for introduction, but I think with Alderman Holmes on this is an important, really important piece of legislation for us to look at and understand it very well, with thanks to our Housing and Homelessness Commission and all the advocates who have been here on this for so long.
Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. I think Mr. Selden kind of highlighted really what is, to me, the important distinction here. The easy solution to problems is it tends to be punishing people. You don't want something to happen a certain way. You come up with a punitive program, and I think that's largely what this amounts to. And what that does, as I mentioned before, and as Alderman Fisk highlighted, that pushes the cost down to, like, it's the wrong people. You're pushing the cost down on people that also cannot afford to bear the cost. And those are the people that are going to have to ultimately bear 100% of the cost of this. This isn't a community-wide program. This isn't a program that everyone in Evanston is going to bear the cost for. It's those, say it's a 100-unit building, it's the other 90 units that will have to pay. And to me, it's not even close to the right result. However, the point of promoting the housing is extremely important, and I think what we should try to do is focus more on the incentive process. Can come up with something that, by way of zoning, density, I won't say parking, but there are things that we have to offer that are incentives to a developer, that are things of value, instead of taking a punitive approach. So if we can provide something that is of significant value to allow them to look at this and say, okay, this is a good deal. I can go to the bank and say, you know what, I can build this many more units if I can include this in the mix. And that's much more sellable than doing the math calculation on, do I write the check for $100,000 or do I pass on the cost to the tenants over a period of time? So I appreciate the work that's gone into it, but I would like to see, at the end of the day, a product that is more something incentive-based and not necessarily what we have here.
Alderman Holmes?
Well, since I'm one of those seniors that's actually now living on bonus, because we're only promised 10, and I'm past that, so I'm living on bonus. But if had not, I did, thank goodness, yes, but I'm very serious about that, because I could not afford to live in Evanston if I did not own my home already. And that worries me. And I have friends that have lived here for many, many years that have issues. And I think that the piece on the seniors that Alderman Tindon just mentioned is something that we really do have to think about, and other demographics in our community. I'm certainly supportive of any kind of incentives that we could give, but I still think, I'm sorry that you consider it being punishment, but I think that there has to be some way that we have got to get developers to understand that we want to have affordable units. And I think it was Mr. Saunders who mentioned throughout the city of Evanston. So we're just not looking at one area, so that wherever they're going to build, and Alderman Rainey, I can't think of any vacant spaces now, but I'm sure some developers have gotten some spaces already in their minds of where they want to develop in this community, and that they should be thinking about putting some affordable units in there. I'm happy with 10%. Now, I don't have to move it up to 20. I'm happy with 10%. That if we would have that and know that those units were going to still be affordable, at least we would know that there would be those units in different segments of the community. I'm thinking about all the building that has been done since, say, 2006, 7. I don't think there are any affordable units in any of those. I don't believe.
What buildings have been?
Well, we have new ones on Central Street. We have new ones on Ridge. Where are those affordable units? I just don't know. If I remember correctly, and I think we talked about this in terms of one developer paying money into the Affordable Housing Fund. I don't remember anything coming in there, so I don't know what we've done with that. Maybe we've been.
But he still paid 200 and something.
Well, this one.
The property that's
Yeah,
going up on
1717
Maple.
Ridge. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, on Ridge. Mm-hmm.
That's a condo.
Good. Did
Yeah.
they pay into
Yeah.
the?
No, Carroll Properties paid in. Carroll Properties paid in. And look at the trouble we gave him. We were really grateful for that. We stuck it to him big time.
So I don't know.
All right.
I just know that we've got to do something. I think that Paul said it well. We do look a little bit more white every day and a little bit more rich every day, richer. And if we want to continue to do this facade of that we have a diverse community, then that's fine if we want to pretend that. But we're only pretending, folk. The emperor really doesn't have any clothes on, and we're going to have to go ahead and say that.
Alderman Fisk?
Sarah, in what buildings are there set-aside units? I think, I don't know them. I think there were scholarship units in Mather there were not?
No,
There were
Mather does
scholarship-
not have set-aside units. They have two things in their planned development. One is they pay $125,000 to the Affordable Housing Fund
Okay.
annually, and they have 30, they have a set amount of money, which is significant. I don't remember it off the top of my head. I think it's 20 or 30 million. In charity care, they must provide over a 10-year period. That charity care is not defined as housing necessarily. I don't know what all of it entails.
So were the scholarship units then just for existing residents of
It
Georgia?
could be. I mean, I
Okay.
don't know.
I'd like to know that. The other building, the Sienna, I believe, had set aside. And can you tell me how many years was that for, and how many units were there?
The actually 1717 Ridge has 9 units. The Sienna had, we put, there
where
are
is Sienna?
7.
Sienna's on Oak and
The
between
Sienna
Church and
condos. The Sienna condos didn't have set-aside units per se, but they do have affordable housing in that there were 7 people who bought condominiums there. They were all partnered through Center for Independent Futures,
Okay,
and they
okay.
all got down payment assistance. I think all of them did.
And for how many years was that?
I don't know the terms of that. I'm sorry, I can get you that.
The unit.
Yeah.
They bought the units, though.
I know, but there was a condition on them for, and I don't know whether it's
Yes.
when they turned over, they could go back to market rates, or whether that was.
I would have to look that up. I
just
don't
like
have that information. I can get
Okay,
that for you.
thanks.
All right. Sarah, please stand, because the questions that I have to do with there not being new housing built, other than by not-for-profit. And a not-for-profit, obviously, is going to provide for affordable housing.
Right.
Let's say in the next 4 years, no developer other than this developer builds a building of any significance. I can't see anybody building a 5-unit or a 10-unit building and then be subject to these requirements. Or even if they weren't subject to requirements, that's a very difficult size to build. What do these amendments have? What effect do they have on current housing and the people who currently live in that housing who, one, are having a difficult time paying for their housing, or their rent is, more than 50% of their income? What does this do to help them?
Well, this doesn't address that. Some of the programs that we have that we're
No,
using.
I know, we're not talking about all the programs we have, I am fully supportive of, but they're already on the books. I'm talking about, we're talking about these amendments.
Yes.
What do they have to do with the current situation? Really nothing.
No.
Really nothing. So that's my problem with this. We're talking about, every one of you who spoke tonight talked about keeping people here who are here now, the problem with people not being able to afford their rent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This does nothing to help that. And until we have an ordinance that does help that, I don't see the point of, I'm really not interested, and I know Paul Sullivan is one of the most decent human beings in this world and wants to house everybody, but I really only care right now, I'm very short-sighted, I only care about helping people that are right here, right now. And I mean, if we were doing that and helping others, and we had the time and the wherewithal to help others, that would be great, and I would support that. But we don't have the wherewithal to help people who are here right now with these amendments. And I just think that we need to address that. Alderman Tundon. You said it really doesn't, you read this and you know it doesn't help, but we're all talking about helping people now. We had an opportunity with the North Shore Hotel, which most of us said, well, it needs to be renovated, let's get it renovated, and, just hope for the best. And it didn't work out that way. We did fight the Mather, and we did get stuff out of the Mather, we really did. That was a great effort. But I don't see us, other than emergency housing and those kinds of things. We can't subsidize everybody's rent. I don't think it's the proper function of municipal government to subsidize everybody's rent or subsidize everybody's income so that everybody can have 38% of their income going to housing. It's, so that's my problem. Alderman Tendem. Huh?
What do you suggest we do?
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm looking for, we had all these committees working on this. I'm looking for, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, rent control? Oh. And that would only help, the next time the rents came around. You can't do, it's not going to happen. I just don't see what we can do. We could enforce, we could start legislating for the next hotel that, retirement community or whatever, but I think waiting, I mean, how long has Maine and Chicago been in the public arena? 4 years. Okay, so let's say we pass this. That building, not a shovel has been put in the dirt, and that they're coming here tonight for us to approve their planned development. So if we pass this, the next developer could be 4 years or 5 years away. I mean, if something is just starting now. I mean, we're almost talking about the next generation. And I know we have to plan for that. But this doesn't help anybody today. And in fact, if you do not have developers building housing, then you don't add to the housing stock. You don't add to it. So if you don't add to the housing stock, you can't provide new housing for people. And I don't mean new, but housing. Because people who live in housing now will be moving into the new housing, which will leave the other housing empty for others. So it's just, I don't know. Alderman Tundem, sorry.
Thank you.
So I don't get this.
I think the one part of this that does address a not too distant future, or at least potential not too distant future, is the condo conversion. We have 3 very, very large rental buildings. 2 are complete. One is going up in Emerson, and I don't think it's too far fetched to think that they might at some point go condo. That, if you look at the example of the North Shore, where people were comfortably living there, obviously it needed a lot of upgrades, but the upgrade of that residence building has caused a lot of people not to be able to afford to live there anymore. And I think the same thing could happen with the buildings that we have, the very large buildings, Amley, Central Station, and E2 or whatever it's called. So I think that we are looking at something very realistic in the very not too distant future, at least potentially.
Well, I couldn't disagree with you more, but that's okay. Alderman Grover?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am interested both in addressing the current shortage of affordable housing, but also in thinking ahead to the future. I don't know how many of us regret what happened at North Shore Hotel. I can't remember its new name, but I don't want to find ourselves years from now regretting that we had opportunities to create units of affordable housing and chose not to. And we had mechanisms to do it, we had the means to do it, and we had potentially condo conversions or new housing units and buildings being constructed, and they did not include affordable units. There is, by the way, on Green Bay Road, a new building that's about to open for residency at 2500, which is 2500 Green Bay Road, just 12 units of luxury apartments. So it's a smaller scale apartment building right close to the south end of the Central Street metro station. And those are rental units.
Any affordables in there? Alderman Nguyen.
Well, I think this issue is a critical one in Evanston, and especially when we see the numbers of what has happened over the last 9 years as a result of really the tumultuous economic times that we've all come through, and we see the lasting effects of what's happening there with wages going stagnant and housing increasing, and the fact that people can't move on into their own housing, so they're staying put in the rentals and then driving up the rental price. I mean, it's all of these very interesting forces that have come together and driven our affordable housing percentage down so much. I was on the council in 2004 when we originally studied this issue for a long period of time, and I think what we need to do again is hear from all of the stakeholders on how to prepare and draft an ordinance, if that's the direction we go into, on what is workable. I think these are. I agree with most of what's been said here on the council. We have a significant problem. We need to look at it. But I see Alderman Wilson's point, and I think that's an obstacle that's too big to get through on this right now. But we also need to hear from the development community. I mean, they're the significant player in all of this. And, I don't hear their voice in this because we're looking at them as a partner in this process. And not that I've ever been known as a friend of developers, but I do think it's critical that we hear from that part of the community in terms of understanding how would this work for them? What would work for them? I think it'll be interesting to hear back from Highland Park. I noticed one of the critical aspects of Highland Park's ordinance, which I don't necessarily agree with, is that the affordable units can be smaller in size, not have as nice amenities in them. I'm actually surprised at that. Maybe I shouldn't be, since it's at Highland Park. They're significantly different. They're not the same quality. So I think we need a lot more information about this to understand what's workable and how we can tackle this problem possibly from some other directions as well. Because one of the problems about why we have not added any units is because we haven't had condo buildings built until this past year. We went through a 5-year freeze where nothing was built. We didn't even have rental built. Another effect of the Great Recession. So I'd like to get a lot more information and to really move forward with the
Alderman
discussion.
Nguyen, one of the things Alderman Holmes and I talked about today was establishing a subcommittee only of council members to bring together developers and the housing organizations to focus in on this and how we can make this work more smoothly and not be a stumbling block to going forward.
And that is what we did in 2004. We had meetings with the developers here who had worked in Evanston and the surrounding communities, and that's how we reached that original inclusionary housing
And
ordinance.
I don't think we benefited that much over the long haul with the work that we did. And I too would be very interested in knowing the influx or the creation of affordable units in Highland Park. I know I would like to know that. Alderman Holmes.
Oh, I was just going to say that we did talk about the possibility of setting up a committee, and if rather than just let this go by the wayside, I'd rather set up a committee and see what we can do, because we've got to do something. I mean, we just can't continue to ignore it. It's
But
a real
Alderman
issue.
Holmes, I would really encourage us, as we talked earlier, to do a subcommittee only of members of the council so that we can really get our hands around this and, invite others to come and talk to us.
Absolutely. I would-
about the format that we have in front of us.
And as long as we do a date certain so that we can make sure that we get it done, then I'm agreeable.
And the two of us discussed that it would be absolutely a date certain on the agenda, the second September meeting, because we're only going to have one August meeting. There's going to be a whole bunch of stuff on the first September meeting. So would you like to make a motion and see if people support that?
Okay.
What?
The motion to introduce.
Pardon me?
We still introduce it?
You can introduce it. We need to have, return it to committee so that we can return it to the subcommittee so it can be discussed.
Okay.
So.
Madam Chair, may I amend my motion, which was to introduce this ordinance, to introduce the ordinance and hold it in committee for further discussion?
Okay. But I'd like the further
And-
discussion to be very specific, Alderman Holmes. Could you?
With Alderman Holmes's amendments or additions to that motion for
Right, but-
introduction.
Okay.
Okay, and then that would be to establish a subcommittee made up of council members to meet and bring back to the council no later than, let's go for October. I'm just thinking in terms of time because we're going to be away in August. So maybe the first meeting in October?
October. Okay. And we'll try not to use too much of staff time. I think we have all of the information. We just need to get our act together and get something that we can all support. Okay? All right? Yes.
I'd like to propose that we do have someone from the committee, the Housing and Homelessness Commission, and since
Not on the committee.
and since
They'll
I'm
be
the only,
invited. No, I'm
the only
Okay.
alderman on the committee, I
Right.
would like to.
But, Alderman, when a subcommittee is formed in a standing committee,
Yes.
the chair really sort of has a prerogative, and according to our council rules. And I am saying that I really think that there have been all these committees, we have all their minutes. We need to have a council committee because we're the ones that have to pass
No,
this.
I understand. I just
Yes.
would like.
Well, they can come to every meeting. They'll
I know.
all
I
be
mean,
open meetings.
I was referring to myself, actually, since I am the representative on the.
You may be on anybody can be
I
on
really
the committee that
appreciate that.
wants, if you're on the council. Anybody. We said alderman. You are one. All right, so anyway, we'll figure that out in the next Rules Committee meeting, I think. All right, so all those in favor of Alderman Grover and Alderman Holmes' joint motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Moving right along.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Chair. Perhaps in the interest of time, there's a couple of items that perhaps could be continued to a future meeting. Mr. Munzer, I think perhaps P2 could be continued, and perhaps P4. I think there's an
Okay,
urgency.
we'll figure this out. Okay,
I'm sorry?
okay.
And then we would ask the committee then to act on P3 and P4. Does that work, Mr.
Well,
Munzer?
what about P5?
What about
I
P5?
definitely want to act on P5.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I meant.
Okay, let us move on. We're going to do that.
Okay.
I promise, yeah. Okay, so we're going to skip P2. Could I have a motion to hold P2 in committee? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Although I'd be
I understand.
perfectly willing to pass it. Do you want
I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I
to?
mean,
Okay, let's do it. I'll start with Alderman Fisk.
Okay. So we're going to go to P2, which is Ordinance 68014, amending the zoning ordinance text for notice requirements for zoning applications. The Plan Commission and staff recommend City Council adoption of Ordinance 68014 to amend various parts of Chapter 3, implementation and administration of the zoning ordinance to clarify public hearing notice requirements for zoning applications. The proposed amendment provides a consistent language to clarify public hearing notice requirements. It's for introduction. I move introduction.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next, P3, Alderman Nguyen. We're going this way.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have ordinance 93014, granting a special use for scoreboards at Ryan Field, 1501 Central Street. The ZBA and city staff recommend City Council adoption of this ordinance, granting a special use permit for scoreboards at Ryan Field. I move introduction.
Okay. Is there a second? Second. Would you like to also move suspension?
Yes, please. I move suspension.
All right. Suspension of the rules has been moved and seconded. All those in favor of moving introduction and suspension on this, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving right along. Ordinance 81014, Alderman Wilson.
So we're just going to do it, not skip it?
Are we doing
That's
it?
fine. Ordinance 81014, this is the Planning Commission and staff recommend City Council adoption of Ordinance 81-0-14 to establish land use regulations for neighborhood gardens, urban farms, and rooftop urban farms as principal uses.
Is there any discussion on this one? This is a little meatier. No? All right. Okay. All those in favor of recommending introduction to the council, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, Alderman
P5,
Holmes.
ordinance 92-0-14, extension of the Church Street Village Plan Development of 1629 to 1691 Church Street. Staff recommends City Council adoption of this ordinance, extending the time for completion of Church Street Village Plan Development located at 1629 through 1691 Church Street, originally approved in April of 2006. The ordinance grants the approval to complete the 13 unfinished townhome units and construct the last remaining 8 unit buildings within 3 years. Move introduction.
Second. This is a good one. Somebody's here to speak on this?
the attorney is here if you have any questions on.
Otherwise, you don't.
Oh, no.
Anybody have any questions?
No,
This is
glad it's
great
getting-
news.
yeah, it is great
Really
news to
great
get it
news.
done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, all those in favor of recommending introduction on 92014, the Church Street project, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Oh, there was even, was there a presentation on this?
There was, if there was any questions, but
Okay.
I guess not.
All right, so there's a communication. Do you want to deal with that?
I can just briefly, 30 seconds. It was in your packet. Mark Munzer, Director of Community Development. This is a project that our department undertook over the last year. This Community Development Department staffs 9 different boards and commissions. When I came on board, there was, I noticed a need to use templates for all their processes, the way we were dealing with all of our chairmen and various staff members and their rules of conduct, and all of that needed to be changed, how we were posting information on the website. So what we did is we met, every single staff liaison to a board and committee and myself met, and we now have a standardized procedure for each of the 9 boards and commissions that we staff, and that also includes chairman briefings, and to make sure that the chair of that committee is well aware of the topics before them that month, and that we're there to answer any questions up front. And obviously the goal of all this is to make the recommendation to all of you be as high quality as possible. So I'm hoping that it can serve as a template for some of our other departments who staff committees.
And what about training? I mean, because the boards and commissions that have to do with community development are complex. They're all complex, but they really require a certain.
It's a very good point. Training was definitely part of it. The Illinois State Planning Conference is in October in Evanston, and I'm happy to say most of our Plan Commission and ZBA members will be attending that.
Excellent.
So.
Okay. Alderman Grover?
Madam Chair, I think one of the more interesting things is the renaming of our Site Plan and Appearance Review Committee, as proposed, to the Design and Project Review.
That will be an ordinance in front of you in September. The idea behind that is that it's we're paying particular attention to design and aesthetics and building materials and the entire project rather than just a site plan.
So it's
and
really-
the idea also is to make sure that we have staff that are pertinent to a project, that they're the ones there giving comment.
So it's really to make a name for this committee that's more appropriate for what its actual work is?
Correct.
Thank you.
At last. Thank you.
All right, could I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you.